Hi, Peter Charles here, Hooked for Life Fly Fishing. And if you've seen my recent videos, you've seen me talk about streamers that involve either imitative or attractor patterns. I've talked about the size of streamers too. Today we're going to get into the color of our streamers. And we're going to get into more of a general idea of color as opposed to, oh, this color works and that color doesn't work. That's not a useful discussion because it will vary from water to water and situation to situation. So I'm talking about more about the general distribution and arrangement of color and how fish perceive color, because there's certain, depending on the species and depending on the water, sometimes there's certain color frequencies they don't see all that well. So sometimes it's a more of a counter shading type of thing that is important than the precise color. So let's get into it. Oh, before I get into that, I should talk about something. Technically, a lot of the flies I'm showing you are actually considered bucktails rather than streamers. A streamer is a fly that has a feather wing. Let me see if I can get one out here. Oops. There we go. There's a feather wing, right? Okay. That's what we would call a streamer officially. The flies I've got here are all considered bucktails. Even the one with the rabbit strip, it's still a hair wing, so it's still a bucktail. For simplicity, I'm going to refer to them all as streamers. It just saves time. Okay, on to the subject. I've got 5 of my flies here. Can't count anymore. 5 of my flies here. And they all use some form of counter shading, especially these two. This is my black-nosed dace pattern. This is my brown trout weimer pattern. And counter shading is light on the bottom, dark on top. And you look at the picture in this book. You see it right on that fish. White belly, dark back. It's the way fish are formed, basically. You look at any fish in the ocean that swims and can be seen from the underside, it's going to have that counter shading. The only time you really see a fish that doesn't have much counter shading is one that's designed to be right on the bottom. You know, it spends its life basically anchored to the bottom. And then all it is dark on top. You see all this dark, and down the sides too. So when you see, what's kind of really important, when you see a minnow from the side at a distance, you actually see the outline more than you see the color. And you see the counter shading more than you see the color. All right, so I'll stick this little video up of minnows under the water, and you'll see that at a distance, all you're seeing is outline. It's just a dark shape in the water. And so I think when I'm talking about color and counter shading, I'm going to throw outline in there as well, is to get roughly the outline correct. In other words, for it to be really an imitative pattern, we want to have some approximation the outline is going to work. And that's with the outline when wet, because the outline when dry is a totally different thing. It's what it looks like when it's in the water was what counts. And so when you look at this video, as you fish are closer, you see more of the counter shading, you see more of the flash, but all you're seeing is sort of olive. You know, there's sort of an olive to it, but there's not a lot of more detail. So imagine yourself as a trout or a bass, and you're about to eat one of those fish. When you see it from a distance, you see the outline. As you get closer, you're starting to see, the counter shading, a bit of flash. As you get closer still, you're going to start to discern color more accurately. And then when you get really close, you're going to see all the details, the eyes, the fins, all of that. So as the fish commits to it, they're getting more and more detail the closer they get. So I think what's important to us to consider is that where we want to put our effort is more into the outline and the general color, the general shape, and the counter shading. I think that's the most important thing, to get that fish to commit, to go for it. And then you can add a little extra detail and color to help it keep on going. Because I've had this problem, and I'm sure other people have had it too. You get follows, and the fish is following your streamer and maybe nipping at it a bit, but not really hitting it. I was fishing the Vermilion River with woolly buggers, And they always work, right? Well, not this time. And I changed colors, tried different things. They were not committing to the woolly bugger. And I was using a sinking line. The vermilion is quite deep, so I'm standing on the bank, casting off a big, huge boulder. And I cast into the deep water, and as I brought it up, 2 or 3 big smallmouth would be coming up after it, making little dashes at it. They weren't committing to it. So obviously, they were seeing it as interesting, but they weren't seeing it as worth something to eat. If I had more imitative patterns in my fly box, I might have been able to get a few of those. Unfortunately, I was traveling very, very lightly, so I only had woolly buggers with me in a 1 rod, 1 reel, 1 line type of thing. I was in Sudbury on business, and so after supper I would go out for an hour to hit the river. And so that was a situation. Not having something that they would commit to was costing me fish, and I got a few, but I didn't get a lot that day. And so really, when we're thinking about how the fish see our flies, and what causes them to commit, I think the first thing will be outline. The second thing will be the counter shading. The third thing will be the flash and the approximation of the color. And only eyes and gills and fins come into play right at the last moment as he's about to. So, when you're putting your flies together, think about that. Now, you can see my variation here. I'm going to talk about this book for a second. And I'm sure there's other books. This is McLean's Field Guide to Freshwater Fishes of North America. And he talks about the fish, and he also talks about the range of the fish. So there's some catfish ones, for example. And he talks about where you're likely to find them. So you can see if, like, northern red horse sucker, is that going to be a fish in your area or not? That sort of thing. This is a very valuable book. And I find that these pictures are actually, they're paintings or drawings, but they're really well done. And they're quite representative. And because I've done some underwater video and I've looked at, the results. And, when I look at this chub, for example, and I look at the chubs that I've got videos on, they're very similar. So a book like this, if you're going to get serious into streamers and bucktails, this is a book like this you need, either this one or something similar to it. That's going to give you an idea of the general color arrangement, the degree of counter shading, the profile, and the size, which is the other thing. So then you can go out and put some streamers together with the same care and attention we put to dry flies. So why shouldn't we? Why should we just throw some hair on a hook and take it out and hope for the best? Why not build our streamers and our bucktails to look like actual fish? Sounds like a good idea. That's why the old brown trout weimer works wonderfully. It looks like a bunch of different bait fish that live in my local river. And I've caught 15 species on it now, including striped bass in the ocean. So they like it too. So it's very imitative. You see this thing move in the water, you're going to think, oh, well, I even want to eat that. So the bottom line here is, when you go to tie a bucktail or streamer and you want to make it imitative, it's profile, counter shading, color, and the details afterwards. So put them in that order. And, what's most important? Yeah, it's that outline, and then the counter shading, and then the color. So keep those things in mind, and I think you'll have very, very effective streamers. Cheers.